All right, so get this. We're going deep into deception today. Like how to actually spot a lie.
Yeah.
You sent in a ton of articles about it, all kinds of stuff. Little facial twitches you can look for, or even analyzing someone's words.
It's crazy, right? Like humans have been trying to figure this out forever.
I know. And we've got some pretty wild sources to unpack. So before we start calling out every little fib we see, it's good to remember this isn't about becoming like a human lie detector, right?
Yeah. No magic formula.
Exactly. Pubes are complicated. Plus, you got to think about the whole situation, like what's going on.
Definitely. No one sign means anything for sure by itself.
Okay, so this deep dive, it's about awareness, picking up on subtle cues,
Yeah.
and maybe having a little fun while we do it.
Totally.
So let's bust some myths right off the bat. You know those classic signs of lying? Everyone always says to look for them. Avoiding eye contact. Fidgeting.
Doesn't always mean anything.
Right. If those things always meant someone was lying, don't you think liars would figure out how to not do them?
You'd think so. It's all about controlling how you come across.
Right. And let's be real. We're probably both fidgeting right now, recording this.
So,
Doesn't mean we're lying.
exactly. Everyone has their own kind of normal behavior.
Right. Their baseline.
Yeah. What looks suspicious on one person might be totally normal for someone else.
So true. Okay, so like eye contact,
The classic.
right? Everyone says liars avoid eye contact.
But studies show there's just no consistent link. Some liars make more eye contact on purpose,
Great.
thinking it'll make them seem more honest.
So if someone's staring me down,
They could be telling the truth. They could be a really good liar. Or maybe that's just how they talk.
makes you wonder.
Goes back to that context thing. Who is this person? What's going on? What's normal for them?
Okay, so eye contact's out. What about fidgeting?
Nope. Another myth. You can fidget because you're nervous, but you can be nervous and not be lying.
So true.
Bored, excited, uncomfortable. Could even be for a medical reason.
Right. And like you said before, maybe a liar tries extra hard to stay still,
Could be.
which actually makes them look more suspicious.
Right. So it's not that simple. So the question is, what should we actually be looking for?
Okay, spill the tea.
Research suggests looking at less obvious stuff, things people can't control as easily.
Interesting. Let's talk about faces.
Yeah.
Then everyone says it's the window to the soul. But can you actually see a lie in someone's face?
Well, even faces can be tricky.
One of the articles you sent in mentioned these things called micro-expressions.
Ah.
They're these super quick facial movements. Supposedly they show your true emotions, but they happen crazy fast, right?
Like fractions of a second. Even trained professionals have a hard time seeing them reliably.
So like those TV shows where they zoom in on someone's face and know they're lying.
Totally unrealistic.
Okay, so no dramatic slow-mo reveals. What about bigger changes in expression? Like overall demeanor. Could that help?
Yeah, definitely. That baseline we were talking about,
Yeah.
that's where it comes in handy.
Look for changes. That's the key.
So like going from really expressive to suddenly super still.
Could be. Or like nodding their head yes, but saying no.
Whoa. Like their face betrays their words. Exactly. And those things are harder to control.
There's like a little leak of the emotion they're trying to hide.
Right. And again, what's normal can be totally different depending on the person and the situation.
Oh, for sure. Like different cultures see eye contact totally differently.
Exactly. And some people are just naturally more expressive. What looks like a huge change to you might be their everyday face.
That's so true. Okay, so we've learned eye contact and fidgeting, not so reliable, micro expressions, cool, but basically impossible to catch.
Yep.
Facial expressions can
Yeah.
be helpful, but got to know the person and the situation.
It all matters.
What about how someone talks? Can that give us clues?
Oh, yeah. Words are super revealing. Actually, some research says what people say is even more reliable than body language.
Really? Why is that? Because it's harder to control.
It's part of it. Like, making of a lie, that takes a lot of brain power. Keeping your story straight, making sure you don't contradict yourself.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting.
It is. And that can lead to mistakes in how you speak.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of verbal slip-ups should we listen for?
One thing is vagueness. Liars often avoid specifics
Why?
because details can be checked.
Ah, so if they're vague, it's harder to get caught.
Right. They might dodge questions, make excuses for not remembering stuff.
It's like they're building a story with as few holes as possible.
Exactly. Another thing, repetition. Ask a liar the same question a few times. They might give you the exact same answer every time.
Interesting. Why?
Because they're afraid to say something different and mess up their story.
So if I'm getting the same canned response over and over,
Could be a red flag. Also, pay attention to I statements.
I statements.
Yeah. People who are telling the truth, they use I a lot. Because they're confident in their memories, liars often avoid it.
So instead of I went to the store, it's the store was visited.
Exactly. Or mistakes were made. It's subtle, but they're avoiding taking responsibility.
Wow, I never noticed that.
Happens all the time. You'll also hear liars using phrases like, to be honest, or frankly.
Why do they do that?
It's like they're trying to convince themselves as much as you.
It's like when someone says no offense, but what they said was totally offensive.
Exactly. Another thing to watch out for is sudden praise. Like if someone starts complimenting you a lot in the middle of a tense conversation.
Like they're trying to butter you up before they give you bad news?
Could be. Or they might use humor or sarcasm to avoid answering directly.
So cracking a joke when you're trying to have a serious conversation?
Could mean they're hiding something. What about stalling tactics? Have you ever noticed those?
I feel people do that all the time.
Liars love them. Repeating the question back to you, asking for clarification, pretending they didn't hear you.
To buy themselves time to think.
Exactly.
This is amazing. We're like learning a whole new language.
Whole language of deception.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like any language, it takes practice to really get it.
It does. But with a little effort,
Yeah.
you can start to pick up on these little clues.
And remember, it's not about catching people out.
Right.
It's about understanding how people work.
Exactly.
Getting a better read on who you're dealing with.
And making better decisions.
Okay, so we've busted some myths, talked about faces, and dove into the world of words, and we're just getting started.
There's so much more to talk about.
Right. We're going to get into this crazy software that can analyze your writing for deception, plus this thing called cognitive overload. It's really fascinating.
Definitely.
Stay tuned for part 2.
So welcome back to our deep dive into deception. Last time we were talking about those classic signs of lying and how they're not always what they seem.
Right, and how even faces can be tricky.
For sure. And we start to touch on some of those subtle things you can pick up on in someone's words or their body language.
Yeah, and like I promised, we're going to get into some more unusual approaches to lie detection.
Okay, let's do it.
One of the sources you sent in mentioned software that can actually analyze writing, like scan it for signs of deception.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count, LIWC for short.
That's the one. It's pretty wild. It's basically like having an X-ray for text.
Okay, that sounds intense.
Right. It's not about looking for specific lie words, though.
So it's not about whether someone types, I am not lying.
No, it's about patterns in how they use language.
Like what kind of patterns?
Like how often they use certain types of pronouns or emotional words. Even punctuation can be a clue.
So it's like, it's not what they're saying, it's how they're saying it.
Exactly. Their writing style can reveal their underlying psychological state. And the crazy thing is, LIWC has been shown to be surprisingly accurate at spotting deception.
Really?
Yeah, some studies show it's even better than humans at it.
That's incredible. So what kind of patterns does LIWC look for?
Well, one thing is first-person pronouns. Like my
Right.
liars tend to use those less often. It's like subconsciously they're distancing themselves from their own lies.
That makes sense. And it ties back to what we were talking about before with the verbal cues, liars avoiding I statements.
Exactly. It all starts to fit together. Another pattern is negative emotion. Words. Liars often use more of those.
Like what kind of words?
Words like hate, worthless, sad, things like that, because they're usually feeling more anxious and stressed when they're lying.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So their word choice reflects their inner turmoil.
Right. They also use fewer exclusionary words, like except or but.
Interesting. Why is that?
Well, those words show that someone's making distinctions, like separating truth from falsehood.
Okay.
Liars tend to avoid that kind of complexity because it takes more brain power.
So they keep things simple, even though the lie itself is complicated.
Right. And that's something LIWC can pick up on. Imagine you're looking at a job application.
Okay.
LIWC might flag it if there are way more negative emotion words than usual. Could mean the applicant is hiding something, or maybe they're just super anxious.
Wow. It's like peeking into someone's mind.
And the applications for this technology are crazy. It's not just lie detection. Think marketing copy, political speeches, social media posts.
You can analyze all that?
It can give you insights into people's emotions, motivations, even their personality.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is. But going back to lie detection, is there anything we can do ourselves to get better at spotting a lie in real time?
Like without fancy software.
Right. One technique is to increase the liar's cognitive load.
Cognitive load. What's that?
Basically, it means making them think harder. Lying already takes a lot of mental effort.
Yeah. We were just talking about that.
Right. So if you add to that mental burden They're more likely to slip up.
So how do we do that? Like make them solve math problems while they're talking?
That might work. But there are more subtle ways you could ask them unexpected questions, or ask them to tell their story in reverse.
Like start at the end and work backward.
Exactly. It disrupts their rehearsed story and forces them to think on their feet.
Okay. And then what? We watch for them to break.
Exactly. Look for those signs of cognitive overload.
Yeah.
More ums and ahs, longer pauses before they answer, more speech errors or inconsistencies.
It's like we're throwing them off balance and see what happens.
And sometimes those little moments of imbalance reveal the truth they're trying to hide.
I like it. We're becoming amateur lie detectors.
Sort of. But remember, even with all these techniques, we can't jump to conclusions.
Right. No single behavior means someone is definitely lying.
Exactly. We got to look at the whole picture, all the evidence, the context, the person's normal behavior.
So it's not about finding the one magic bullet.
Right. It's about gathering information, looking for patterns, and being open to new information.
So the real skill isn't just spotting lies. It's being curious observant and always questioning your assumptions.
That's a good point. It's not about catching people out. It's about understanding people better.
Exactly. And making smarter decisions in all areas of your life.
Well said. I think that's a good place to pause for now.
Definitely. But don't go anywhere. In part 3, we're going to bring all these threads together and talk about how crucial context is in recognizing deception. Plus, we'll leave you with some final thoughts on how to become a better judge of truth. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we're back. And we've covered a lot of ground-busted myths about those classic signs of lying, right? We saw how faces can be both helpful and totally misleading, and even got into that fascinating world of linguistic forensics. But there's one crucial piece of the puzzle we haven't really talked about yet. Context. Yeah, it's like the missing ingredient in our lie detecting recipe.
It really is. Context is key. Because without it, even the most obvious signs of deception can be misleading.
So it's not enough to just memorize a bunch of liar behaviors and go around playing human polygraph.
Definitely not. People are way too complex for that. Remember those classic cues we talked about? Like avoiding eye contact or fidgeting? In some situations, those behaviors might actually mean someone's telling the truth.
Really? Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine you're interviewing someone for a job. They're a little nervous, avoiding eye contact, fidgeting in their seat. Do you automatically assume they're lying about their qualifications?
Well, based on what we've learned, probably not.
Right. They're probably just nervous. It's a stressful situation.
Makes sense. It would be weirder if they were super calm and collected, like they had nothing to lose.
Exactly. So you always have to think about the context. When you're trying to figure out if someone's being honest, what's the situation? What are the stakes? What's the relationship between you and this person? And we talked earlier about how culture can play a role, too.
Oh, yeah. Huge role. What's considered polite in one culture could be seen as deceptive in another.
Right. Like we were saying about eye contact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In some cultures, direct eye contact is seen as aggressive or disrespectful, especially between people of different social statuses. So if someone avoids eye contact, it might not mean anything at all.
It's so easy to misinterpret things if you don't understand where someone is coming from.
And it's not just culture, it's also personality. Some people are naturally more expressive, some are more reserved.
Right. Some people are super detail-oriented. Others are more big-picture thinkers.
All of that affects how they communicate.
So we're all speaking different dialects of honesty and deception.
I like that analogy. And just like with any language, it takes time to learn the nuances.
This is making me think that there's no way to be 100% sure if someone's lying.
You're right. There's no foolproof method. But that doesn't mean we should just give up trying to understand people. This whole deep dive, it's not about becoming a human lie detector.
It's about awareness.
Exactly. It's about giving you the tools to make more informed judgments about the people you interact with.
So how do we actually do that? Take all this information and use it in our lives.
The most important thing is to be mindful. Pay attention. And don't just assume you know what's going on.
Don't jump to conclusions.
Right. Look for patterns over time.
And sometimes the absence of those deception cues is a stronger indicator of honesty than anything else.
That's a great point. Look for those genuine moments where someone's words and actions line up. That's what builds trust.
So this deep dive has been about recognizing truth as much as spotting lies.
Absolutely. Because in the end, that's what we all want, to connect with people who are real and honest.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into deception. But before we go, I want to remind our listeners about the power of sharing knowledge.
Yes, if you enjoyed this conversation and learned something new, please share this episode with someone you think might find it interesting.
Think of it like planting a seed of curiosity in someone's mind. Each share is a chance to help that seed grow, and maybe even inspire them to look at the world a little differently.
And if you're ready to explore more fascinating topics with us, be sure to subscribe to the All Sorts Podcast YouTube channel. It's a treasure chest overflowing with ideas, just waiting to be discovered.
All Sorts Podcast is your guide, your compass, leading you through the vast and uncharted territories of knowledge. Each episode is a new adventure, full of surprises and aha moments.
So join us as we continue to explore the world together, unraveling complex ideas and making them understandable for everyone.
Until next time, stay curious.
And keep exploring.